Hi, I'm Lori.
And I'm Kevin, and this is No Longer Ashamed.
We are survivors of childhood sexual abuse.
And we're here to share with you that if you're a survivor, you don't have to be alone.
Our logo is a salamander, and the reason is a fire salamander can survive a fire, and you have survived a fire.
We want to help you with your journey to healing and hope.
We are all survivors together, and we walk this journey together, and you are not alone.
By telling our stories, we are hoping that you will have the courage to share your stories as well and find your voice.
Because stories are so important, and for so long I know that I wouldn't tell my story, but when I finally shared my story, that's when I got my freedom.
And this is our journey and your journey to healing and hope. So come with us.
Our guest today is Hampton Conway III, and he has Movement Ministries to help men and women who are in abusive situations to help them get out. Welcome, Hampton.
Thanks for having me.
It's good to see you.
We're really excited to hear your story and then hear about your ministry. So you want to jump right in?
Sure. I guess I'll just start by saying that one of the reasons I founded Movement Ministries with my partner, and one of the reasons why we focus on the population we focus on is because of my own personal experience. So Movement Ministries is a nonprofit, faith-based nonprofit, human resources organization. And so we are just really trying to provide some support, help, hope, healing for victims and survivors of domestic violence, or in some circles they refer to it as intimate partner violence. And we also are working on supporting returning citizens, so folks that are getting out of prison and helping them transition and providing resources for them as well. But personally, because I was in an abusive marriage, I was the one being abused. That's one of the reasons why I'm passionate about helping others.
How long have you been doing this ministry now, Hampton?
So we established it in 2018. And so that's when, I kind of started, personally, I kind of started the advocacy and education path. I want to say maybe 2015, because I separated from my wife in 2014. And then in my effort to just find healing myself, between, going to therapy and then also going to domestic violence events and getting trained myself to help others, that kind of led to starting the nonprofit in 2018.
It seems to me like, and I see this with women, so I don't know if it's the same with men, that it's sort of a process. First, it's like you think something's wrong, and then you start to know something's wrong, but you still don't want to call it. You don't want to name it. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, that's pretty accurate. Yeah, originally you get a sense that, okay, things aren't the way they should be, or things don't feel right. And then, you try things and hope things get better. And then all of a sudden you start to realize, okay, I know for me personally, part of my problem was when I first started to experience it very early in the marriage. We were just a couple months in, and I will say, it was a vast difference from what I had seen and experienced while we were dating. And all of a sudden, things started to change. But when it first started happening, because I had no background knowledge with respect to abuse, domestic violence, like it wasn't something that I talked about as a kid. It's not something I saw growing up, not something we talked about growing up. I'm sure it was happening in my community and in my family, but it was very much what happens in your house stays in your house kind of culture, so I never had any conversations or understood, much about it. So when it started happening to me, I internalized it. I kind of felt like, I must be doing something wrong. And then I proceeded to try to do better, if you will, and love her more and be a better husband and be a better man and, all these efforts because I thought I was failing.
And you did go to your pastor as well. And what did he tell you?
Yeah, so even then, it was still a long time before I really ever called it abuse. I just knew I didn't like the way I was being treated. And I knew it wasn't right. And so I had gone to my pastor at the time. And that was tough because nobody really knew the extent of what was going on. So to open up to somebody was, to me, a big step.
Yeah.
and a big risk. So when I did, his response was, "Oh, so you just gonna let her do that?"
Oh, you're kidding.
And I thought, and I didn't really know how to receive that because I wasn't sure. I'm thinking, oh, okay. I just didn't know what to do with that. So at that point, I kind of felt like, well, shoot, if I can't tell my pastor and get good advice, there's no point in telling anybody else.
Yeah.
So I really kept it a secret for a long time after that.
But there came a point, and how many years in, when you finally got it?
Well, finally got it. I don't know. I don't know if I ever got it.
It's hard. It's so hard.
I will say there came a point where I realized I have to do something.
You told me you had two options.
Yes, it was a very dark time, and the two primary things I was thinking about was either hurting myself or hurting her. And up to that point, I had not ever retaliated or done anything to hurt her. So the fact that I was considering that was a big scary for me, because either both of those options were no good.
Right. But to get to that point, and I think that's what people don't realize, is you feel so helpless that those are your only options.
Yeah, that's your only way out. Especially you weren't being given helpful advice from anyone or felt like you can go to anyone.
Right.
And I think that's what's so important about what you're doing, your ministry is doing, is you're giving people that are in this situation the option, someone to help them. Yeah, someone to believe what they're going through, and also to help them while they're going through this, because there aren't a lot of options. I know I worked at the crisis center for a while, and I felt really limited sometimes when people would call in and they'd be having issues, and I could only give them a couple phone lines maybe, and that's it. And you're going, there's really nothing else out there. So I'm so thankful you're doing this for people.
And when you got to
needed.
when you got to that point, what happened then? Because obviously I look at you and you just look like the nicest guy, and you're a school principal, and so I can see why that was such a dark place. And of course you decided neither one of those were the answer.
No, for sure. Oh, so at that point, I left Pennsylvania and moved to Maryland, moved in with my parents. Unfortunately, I had to leave the kids behind. I couldn't legally just grab the kids and go. So I left and immediately began to get some help and therapy for myself, and then also started the process of trying to get the kids, get custody of the kids through the court system. But it was very, as hard as it was, and I think it was probably one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life, leaving the kids behind. As hard as it was very necessary, because I was just in such a bad place that I needed that time for myself to heal and get better. So I could be better for them even. And so, but then of course going through, so I filed for custody. Custody takes, that process takes some time. So while we're going through that process, the kids were still themselves experiencing abuse. And so I was constantly going back and forth to Pittsburgh to try to file for protection from abuse orders for the kids. And unfortunately, several times I was denied.
And I think that you had said that part of it's because you're a man, maybe because you're a black man. It
was, there were definitely several situations where I felt like, between the police, between judges, Child Protective Services, is like I was always trying to prove myself to these, all these folks, because very often they just assumed that, the mother was the one that was, the mother was the victim. I remember one time in particular, typically when I really got good at knowing when a situation was going to escalate. You experience it enough, you kind of learn.
Right. I've seen this before.
And so I would kind of have moments where when I knew something was going to escalate, I would grab my keys and I would leave before it would escalate. Because I just gotten to a point where, one, I just couldn't take it. And two, I didn't want the kids to witness it. I just didn't want the kids to continue seeing that. And so when it would get to a certain point, I would leave before it really, climaxed. But this particular time, I couldn't escape. And I can't remember if it was because often she would either hide my keys or different things, or block me from getting out, or different things like that. So I couldn't get out the house, but it was bad enough that I ended up calling the police. But when the police got there, she ran out the house flailing and crying and screaming. And I knew as soon as she did that, I said, oh, crap. This is not going to be good.
Not going to end well.
Yeah.
So they wanted to arrest me. And I'm trying to explain to them, like, man, I called. I'm the one who called. I'm the one who need help,
right.
And fortunately, she had no marks on her, because if they'd have seen anything that looked like a bruise or a mark, I'd have been done for.
Yeah.
And that's really typical. Even with the women I work with, they'll call the police, and then the guy goes out and charms the police, and the woman looks like the crazy one.
Yeah.
They're
And
good
so,
at that. Yeah.
So they made me leave. They made me leave.
You're
they
like,
didn't
that's
arrest
all I
me.
wanted to do.
Right.
Yeah.
They didn't arrest me, but they made me leave the house. I was like, okay. So and it kind of just, even with the judges and a lot of decisions they were making and the way my case was handled, I really feel like had I been the woman in the situation, it would have gone differently.
Yeah. And you said at one point the kids were really calling you saying something bad was going on, and you called the police, and by the time you got there, the police were all chummy with her.
Yeah, that was a tough time. I was all the way in Maryland, so it took me 4 hours to get there, but my brother-in-law, my ex-wife's brother, went to the house, and he was only 15 minutes away, but by the time he got there, the police had come and gone, and unfortunately, it was a small town, and some of them knew her personally from high school and that kind of thing, and just, they believed everything she said. And then they asked the kids, were they okay? But they asked the kids, were they okay while she was standing there?
Oh, man. Yeah. So what are they going to do?
Yeah. Right. So it's kind of like, wow. I've never been trained as a law enforcement officer, but I feel like that wasn't protocol.
Yeah, that feels like common sense.
Should have known better.
So after that, you started to try to get custody, and that was a huge, big deal. And you felt like you were fighting an uphill.
Yeah, that was a big deal. And really going back to the police situation, like I will say, even though I think I know the police botched that call. And even though I said they asked the kids while she was standing there, I also believe that if they'd asked the kids when she wasn't standing there, they would have still lied and said they were fine.
Well, when you think about it, foster kids do that. They want their parents, and they'll get into a good, safe home, and they just want their parent, even if they're abusive. It's hard on kids.
And so going to your next question, like I had to really convince the kids to speak up about what was going on, because they, again, it was what happens at our house stays in our house kind of situation. And so nobody knew what was going on behind closed doors. And so when it came time for the kids to actually speak out, like I really had to convince them. I had to work really hard to say, hey, if a judge asks you questions, it's safe to talk to them. If a therapist asks you questions, it's safe to talk to them. If, the police ask you questions, it's safe to talk, so I'm trying to really, really, really convince them that if they speak up and tell the truth, people will make the right decisions. Now, unfortunately, judge made a liar out of me because even I got the kids to speak up. Kids got interviewed. They told the judge what was going on in the home, and the judge still sent the kids back with their mother multiple times. So now the kids are looking at me like,
right, Dad?
Yeah.
You told us that if we spoke up, and unfortunately, they basically snitched on their mother and went back with their mother. Like,
that could not have been easy for them.
No, it wasn't good.
Yeah. And something that you said that really touched my heart is that that abuser, you love them. And so people try to make you leave, or, they try to convince the one being abused. But the hard thing is there is love there.
Yeah. It's, I think I said that because you asked me, what's some good advice to give somebody that knows someone in this situation. And just, you have to remember that as bad as it is, that person loves their abuser.
Yeah.
And you're not going to make as much headway bashing the abuser as you would just being empathetic and a listening ear, and then helping them to make a plan of escape when they do decide they want to leave.
Yeah.
Because even, at that moment, they may be telling you, I'm not happy, I'm miserable, I'm depressed because of X, Y, and Z. But even with all of that, they still may not be ready to leave.
Yeah. And I think that's the biggest deal is if you try to push someone before they're ready, it could be worse.
Yeah.
So when you left, you ended up living in your car or?
No. So there were times that I left on a temporary basis.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I would flee the house, I would sleep in like Walmart parking lot or sleep in my office, at the buildings. You mentioned I was a principal, so I had the keys to the building. I had the alarm code, so I could get in my building anytime, day or night. And so often I would go sleep in my office or in the teacher's lounge, because the teacher's lounge had a really nice couch versus my office chair, right? So I would do that on occasion. But then when I finally left for good, I moved to my parents' home.
Yeah.
And so what's important about that is, and another reason why I'm passionate about doing what I'm doing, is everybody doesn't have a parent's home to go to.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right? Everybody doesn't have a family member to fall back on. A lot of people in these situations don't have anywhere to go.
They don't have a plan.
When I worked at the day center for homeless women, there were so many women that were escaping abuse and they had nowhere to go. So they end up on the street.
Yep. And
it's safer. It's, it's the only place.
And though some of the places that take women,
right,
a lot of the shelters for women only take women.
Right.
Or women and kids sometimes.
Women and kids.
Yeah.
But in some situations too, if your male child is of a certain age, then they won't take them either.
Yeah. In this state, if they're over 12, they won't take a boy over 12. Yeah.
So it's very complicated for males as well in this situation. So, and that's why,
Oh, if you had just had a couple of kids, you might have been able to pull it off, but you had 10 kids.
I mean, honestly, if it had just been me, there have been some, a lot of places that wouldn't have taken me.
Yeah.
Me without any kids. So
I do think for a male, there is just so many less resources.
There are a lot less resources, and it's partly because, one, I think, so we know that a lot of women suffer in silence because they're ashamed to talk about it or whatever the case may be. I think men are more prone to be silent than women. And so we don't have good statistics.
Right. And reason. What is the reason that men tend to be more so?
Well, I think part of it is an ego thing, a pride thing.
Sure.
I think part of it is not understanding that you are actually in an abusive situation.
Right.
And that goes on both sides too. I think that happens to men and women that just, they don't even realize that the relationship is abusive, or they don't realize the extent of it. In some situations too, because, well, he's not hitting me.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
But we know that abuse can take so many other forms,
we tend to normalize it because it's what we learn, what we know. And for men, there's a lot of shame and stigma to admit that you're a victim, that you're opening up to being vulnerable, which you're risking your masculinity there.
Right.
You're risking your identity of who you are by being vulnerable, by being a victim. And so men frankly, men don't talk about their feelings a lot anyway, even with their closest friends and so forth. We just don't open up like that. We're not wired that way. We're not taught to do that much.
And I think the key word is taught, right?
Yeah.
I think we're actually taught the opposite in many instances.
We are. We're taught to, suck it up.
Man up.
Man up. Exactly.
In a way, I feel like that's what your pastor was saying to you. And I mean, I'll tell you, when you told me that, I couldn't get it off my mind. And I know he wasn't trying to be anything like trying to be mean or wrong, but so often, the people we turn to for the help that we really need don't have any training, and they give faulty advice, and then the person stays in abuse even longer.
Yeah. Absolutely. And so that's also an initiative. I really want to bring the training to institutes of faith.
Yes.
Because those are places that people naturally go to for help.
Right.
Yeah.
People will naturally, some people, if they decide to open up to somebody, very often it will be the clergy person or their priest or their, pastor or some leader,
That's who you
in
look
there.
to.
Yeah, absolutely.
For spiritual leadership. Yeah.
And if they're not prepared to deal with that,
right,
they could actually do more harm than good.
Well, actually, they do. And it makes me so happy that that's a goal of yours, because I do work with a lot of women that, first of all, they don't know they're abused, and then they realize they're abused, and then they end up, going to their pastor, and the pastor tries to talk them into staying. And a couple of clients of mine have to actually leave their church because they believe the charmer. They believe the one that told the better story. And it's so heartbreaking. Yeah. Of course, we know whatever we go through makes us stronger. So, and I look at you and I see the amazing work you're doing, but still in the midst of it, if churches were better equipped, it could make a really big difference.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because the kids get traumatized. And I think often, we try, even an abuser sometimes will try to spare the children, but the kids know. They always know.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So you were able to get away, live with your parents, get some help, which I just admire that so much, that you got some help and then you got on the path to get your kids back. And then, you ran into a lot of problems in court and.
Yes. Court's always been tricky, but, I got them help too. So as soon as I did get custody of them, I made sure the kids got into therapy too, which I think was extremely important.
Yeah.
And really trying to normalize therapy and make it something that, they just understand that therapy is just a part of life, Yeah. And so they're to the point now where certain kids will actually come to me and say, "Hey, Dad, can you set an appointment up for me and Dr. So-and-so?"
That's so.
And so that's, I think that's really good that they can be mature enough to know that they need to talk.
Yeah.
And I really encourage, I always tell them, "Nate, you can come talk to me about anything, but if you can't talk to me, you should talk to somebody,"
Seriously, I just think that's so amazing, because I'm a big believer in therapy. So I don't know if you know my story, but my husband, after 14 years, left me for a man. Not only that, he took my best tiara and cemented my my status as a single mom. He left me for a man, and I got the kids in therapy right away, because that was the exact right thing to do. And I'll tell you what, the boys went okay, but my daughter went kicking and screaming, and then she refused to go, and she's going into social work now. But
oh, wow.
It was so hard, because I knew I was doing the right thing, and she was hating me for it. But it's like, we can only do what we can. And, one thing that you said last time that also I thought was really important, because you have 10 kids, and if there was abuse, and it's like, people don't know what goes on, and the manipulation, and, how she probably used that against you, trying to get more kids to keep you.
Yeah. Yeah. There were, so when I do speak, when people find out I have 10 kids,
10 kids.
I immediately address a couple things. So if I have 10 kids, I start off by saying, okay, because I know what the common questions are. One of the first things I'll say is, the 10 children are all to the same woman. So I want to clear that up.
Yeah. Check.
There are no twins or multiples.
I know. I always ask you that.
People always want to know that. And they want to know their ages and their names. But then, of course, they want to know, okay, man, if your situation was so bad, how in the world did you end up making 10 kids? And so it's a multifaceted kind of answer. One being, there were times when she had led me to believe that she was on birth control, and she wasn't. So that happened more than once. Another situation was when I did get to the point personally that I said, okay, I'm going to have a vasectomy. So I think I had a vasectomy scheduled on 2 different occasions, maybe a year or so apart from each other, that when the appointment actually came up, she essentially manipulated me out of following through. And sometimes that might have been her threatening me or threatening her herself, or just different things. So,
and you pay a huge price if you don't do what they say.
Right.
Yeah.
So I gave in twice on that, and I finally went through with it eventually. And honestly, the crazy thing was, I don't think I let her know that I was doing it till that day. I had done the consultation without her knowing.
Wow.
And then I'd scheduled the day and appointment and taken off work without her knowing, because I didn't want her to manipulate manipulate me out of it again.
Yeah. You were wiser at that point.
So now, of course, I paid for that too.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure you did.
But so, and then some other factor, two other things. One was that, very often we just weren't getting along or we just weren't connecting. And so for me, being intimate was one of the few ways that I thought we were connecting because I was starving for connection. But then on the flip side, there were also plenty of times where I just was so depressed and just so down or so upset that I would not want to be intimate. But if I ever was in that situation and she did want to be, it was a catch-22 because if I ever denied her, I knew that would turn into a fight because then now she's going to accuse me of being with somebody else. That's why I don't want to be with her. And, so it was always either, okay, I don't want to do this, but if I don't do it, it's going to turn into a fight. So very often I would just compromise.
Yeah. For the peace. One thing that you said too was when your lawyer finally stood up to the judge for you and said, if this would have been a woman.
Yeah. So what happened with that was the first time I filed for protection from abuse order, we had a hearing where we could both, kind of plead our case. The judge would decide if she was going to make it a permanent order of protection for the kids. I wasn't going for me. I was going for the kids. She did not. But what she did was she made what was called a consent decree. And she wrote in that document that if my ex-wife used any form of corporal punishment at all, that she was going to then give me a permanent protective order. I wouldn't even have to go through with the temporary order situation. Now, sure enough, a couple months after the consent decree, one of my sons sends me a picture of his little brother with her handprint in his back. So I said, well, there we go. So I fly up to Pittsburgh, not fly literally, just driving very quickly. I fly up there and go straight to the court. I get a temporary order. And of course, my lawyer and I are thinking, hey, this is it, man. Once we get to the hearing, we have the legal document that she judge signed, right? This is it.
Yeah.
So we get to the hearing. Of course, the kids speak up again about the things that transpired since the last time. My ex-wife tries to plead her case, and she has a lawyer at this point in time too. My lawyer goes to cross-examine her, and the judge says, "Oh no, you don't need to cross-examine her." And my lawyer's like looking confused, like, "What do you mean?" Her lawyer just asked her questions. It's protocol for me to then, cross-examine her. And the judge actually said, "Well, if you want to cross-examine yourself out of this protective order," she held up a piece of paper. She said, "If you want to cross-examine yourself out of a protective order, then go ahead." So at that point, my lawyer was thinking, oh, okay, well, if she's already decided we're going to get the order, there's no need for me to cross-examine her. So he sat down like, okay, cool. She's basically alluding to the fact that we were going to get the order. So she starts talking and goes into this monologue about her experiences as a mother and a parent and all this other stuff. By the time she finishes talking, she done talked herself out of the order. And she actually said, now mind you, we didn't think there was any decision needed to be made. Because based on the consent decree that she wrote and that she signed, we're thinking like,
it's a done deal.
This is all, we're doing this all as a formality because, she said she was going to make it a permanent order if this happened again. We get to the end of the hearing and she says, you know what? No, I'm not going to give you a order. I'm going to send the kids back with their mother. And so that's when my lawyer, who is normally trying to calm me down,
you're trying to calm him down now.
No, he jumped up. He's like, Yana, damn well if he was a woman, you wouldn't be doing this. And I'm grabbing him like, oh man, sit down. And the reason why I was trying to calm him down was because we were seeing her about protective orders, but she's also the custody judge. So in Pittsburgh, it's one family, one judge. So you keep seeing the same judge. And so I'm like, dude, we still got to deal with this lady several instances down the road. But he was right. I truly believe he was absolutely right. There's no way that she went against her own word. It was just like, what in the world is happening here? And of course, again, the kids are looking at me like, what is going on?
Yeah. You just set them up again, basically. Yeah.
So now you have full custody of 8 of them because 2 are in college, correct?
I have full custody of 8 of them. 2 are in college. 8 are here with me. Well, actually, my 18-year-old I have an 18-year-old that is here with me still. So technically she can do what she wants. Yeah. And my 17-year-old who's about to be 18 can technically do what she wants. Cause we're going back to court in April.
Right. That's what I was going to say. So, so it doesn't end. It doesn't end.
Every year and a half or so, she refiles. And so we go through this all over again.
How old is your youngest right now?
9.
9. Okay. And you've recently remarried.
Correct.
Nice.
Was that, I know that, that when you've been through abuse, it must be really hard to learn to trust somebody else.
Yeah, I honestly had, and I'm the type of person that will always say never. But that was the one thing I said never about.
Yeah.
I said I would never get remarried, but God had other plans, and I'm glad he did. And sent me somebody who was very much what I needed, what our family needed, and very calm demeanor and just really gentle spirit and loving. And so, that worked out.
Yeah. You know, I appreciate your vulnerability so much. And I interviewed you on another podcast, and I almost didn't interview you because of the headline, only because I get so many emails, but it kept popping up. I mean, I feel like it was a God thing. And then when I actually read it, I was like, I got to talk to this guy. And very rarely do I talk about this, but I was briefly in an abusive marriage, less than a year. And I got out, but it was so scary. He would hide my keys. He would take my purse. I had to have a spare hidden. And, it traumatized my children. And even though I got out very quickly, they still had a lot of issues. And, it's been, I think it's been 16 years now, and I haven't remarried. First of all, because I didn't want to put my kids through anything else, because their dad being gay, which I'm not having a problem with that, but he had some partners that were sketchy. And so I didn't want to put my kids through anything else on my side. But still, it's very complicated. And I ended up with full custody of my kids from their dad, and not because he was a bad person, because he wasn't. He just, he was gay. It wasn't that he was bad, but still, there's just so many things to work through. And one of my big things was to not ever talk about their dad in front of them in a bad way. And that was really hard. But he wasn't abusing them. So what was that like for you? Because you had to encourage them to tell the truth, and then it backfired and they went back. So what was that?
So yeah, that's a real tricky thing. And yes, so even now, even once I got custody of them, one of the things that she's very much a master manipulator. And
they're good at it.
Very good at it.
Yeah.
She's very intelligent.
Oh, yeah.
And so she's very good at it. And I had gotten to the point where, for a long time, there were ways she was manipulating me that I didn't even realize.
Of course,
that she was manipulating me. But I could look back on situations and certain things and realize, oh my gosh, that was orchestrated way back here.
Yeah.
One of the things, I don't know if you've ever read this book, you might want to. It's called The Gift of Fear by Gavin DeBecker. And he talks about how often women who get raped knew something was wrong. But this is one thing he said. He said, what they'll do is they'll come up to you at a party and they'll say, hey, can I get you a drink? And you're like, no. And then they'll keep asking and be charming to see how long it takes for you to finally say, okay, go get me a drink. That's part of the process. Or they'll say, you're in a really good mood. And they'll go, oh, you're really having a bad day. And you're like, they cause confusion.
Yeah. And I mean, there were times where she would actually fabricate things just to put me in a position to where I felt like I had to defend myself, or put me in a position to where I felt like I had done something wrong. And it was like the constant, people use that term of feeling like, being in the doghouse. It was like I was always being set up to be in the doghouse, but I actually hadn't done anything to be in the doghouse, but somehow I always ended up, it was crazy. Some of the things that she would do to make me feel like I was always in the wrong, and then, like I said, looking back on things. And then I got to a point where I could start to see how I was being manipulated, and I could avoid some things, but the kids didn't have that understanding. So they would be being manipulated and didn't know. One of my daughters at one point finally kind of saw the light and actually stood up to mom.
Wow.
She surprised the mess out of me. She wrote mom a letter and just really explained like, hey, I don't appreciate this. I didn't like that, kind of thing. Don't do, because what was happening was mom was pitting us against each other.
Exactly.
And mom was telling the kids a lot of things that weren't true about me, about other members of the family. And so I was so cautious and so concerned about not making their mother look bad that I was allowing mom to steer the narrative. And I wasn't providing any counter narrative.
Yeah.
So whatever mom said, that's what they believed.
Right. And that's really a hard place because I can see in just a little bit I know you're a nice guy. And so you're trying really hard to navigate this in a kind way the best you can, but that's what makes it really hard, right? Yeah.
And so it got to a point where I really had to say, like, okay, I need to tell them the truth about some things because they were believing the lies. And one of the ways that climaxed was with one of my daughters attempted suicide. And so it was in the psych ward of the hospital that she and I began to really dig deep and address some major issues that she had with me, that she had with mom, that she had with herself. And that's when I really realized, wow, there's so much that she believes that isn't true. And then I also really realized, I was like, well, if you think like this, what do your siblings think? And they're like, they think the same thing. She's like, duh, they think the same things I think. And I was just like, wow. So, I mean, it got to a point where I really had to say, okay, you said this. Let me explain to you what the truth is about that situation. And, mom told you this about this situation. And mom told you this about this family member. Let me tell you the truth about what happened with that. You know what I mean? And I had to start providing all these counter narratives now, which at first just made her more conflicted, right? Now she's just like, oh my God, I don't know who to believe.
I believe?
It was really tough. Eventually some of the kids started to see for themselves what was true and what wasn't. Now, unfortunately, they're still very much in a position of telling mom what she wants to hear.
Yeah.
Whether that's how they feel or not. Like that culture still exists. Like,
it's a protection.
And so that's one of the issues I'm facing now with this custody situation is that if mom says to a child, hey, you want to live here, right? You think it'd be better for you to live here, right? They're going to be like, oh yeah.
Right.
Right. Whether that's how they feel or not, that's how that works.
Right. And the kids, I will say that I have seen this over and over. The kids will alienate the parent that they know will always love them, and they will cater to the one who might have the mental illness.
There it is.
Am I right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Because they know they'll lose the love of that one, but they know they will never lose the love of the stable parent. Yeah.
And that makes it very hard.
It does.
When you're in a situation where now you've got to try to prove to a judge who's already biased that, you're still, so that's the thing. Like, I'm not saying I'm a better person than anybody else, but from what I know about the situation and what I see, I still think, and that's what I tell the kids. I said, Mom and I don't agree on where you guys should live. And I say, I know you love your mother. I support y'all's relationship. They know that because I will take them to see her whenever she wants, whether it's part of the order or not. And I encourage their relationship. I support their relationship, and I want them to have a relationship. I said, but the problem is Mom and I don't agree on where the best place for you to be is. It doesn't mean either one of us loves you more than the other, or I don't think any less of Mom. I just have a difference of opinion about where the best place is for you to live.
Right.
And so that's kind of how I address it with them. Unfortunately, that's not how she addresses it.
No.
She doesn't address it that way. She makes it, he's not a good dad.
Yeah.
He should be doing better at this. He should, you all don't feel as love down there, do you? You feel more love when you're here. I mean, it's unfortunate.
Yeah. I look at you and you are just such a kind person, and you could be so bitter. And I love that you are walking through this, and you're still walking through it. It's not like you're on the other side, and yet you're already reaching out. And, I know that people call you and you listen and you support other people going through it. And I am just I'm really proud of you that you could speak up. And I know that the biggest thing, like we do this podcast because for men, boy children that are abused, it's very different than women children. And I'm going to say this, and it's easier to look at a woman as a victim than a man. I mean, I think that's our culture. I'm not saying it's right, but I'm saying if a woman comes forward and says, I'm abused, people are going to be, I believe you. If a man comes forward and said, I've been abused, we're going to be a little more like, what? You know?
Yeah. No, I just had a conversation with a guy the other day, and he was telling me about how he and his ex-wife had a custody agreement, and he had the boys, his boys at this particular time, and he was coming out of church with his boys. This is a huge church in the area down here, mega church actually. And they're in the lobby of this mega church, and she shows up and starts screaming and carrying on about how he's not letting her see the boys. It's his weekend. But of course, what do you think everybody in that lobby assumes? Because she's in there making this big old scene. And because it's a mega church, they have security and police on site, that are ready to, snatch the kids from him. And, so he had to actually produce, the paperwork that showed that was his weekend, but of course now the whole, everybody that was in the vicinity is looking at him like, oh, look at this sorry man who won't listen. You know what I mean?
Won't let his kid see his mom.
Yeah, but that's the assumption. That's the assumption.
Yeah, it's automatic. I mean, it just.
And that's why I wanted to have you on the show, because I feel like I want to present to people that are listening that there is help for situations. And I'm a firm believer that when we tell our story, that it will help somebody. And that to me is the biggest thing, that you are vulnerable and willing to share this story. And I know it's not easy for you.
Yeah. And no, it's not. It is. It's gotten easier, but it's not always easy. And I think, round about October, November, because October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month.
Right.
At that, I had spoken so much during that time. I was doing so many different events and interviews. Like, I think the amount that I was talking about, it honestly took a toll on me a little bit. And because, one of the things I hadn't mentioned was being diagnosed with psychogenic amnesia, which is like a PTSD type of thing where I basically had forgotten. Like, I suppressed the bad stuff so much that it's totally gone.
Is it like repressed memories? Or I've never heard of that, so I'm really curious.
All I know is they're
block it.
Gone. Like, I literally do not remember certain things that happened. And what's crazy, so let me tell you how drastic this is. My mother sent me some pictures. So this was in 2015.
That's when you left, right?
I had left at this point. I think I was back in Pittsburgh just because I was going back and forth to court. She emails me some pictures she found. This was a time where, people save their pictures on CDs, digital photos on their CDs. It wasn't a whole lot of cloud stuff happening then, right? So my mom would always back up her pictures to CDs, and she discovered these pictures of me had a bite mark on my chest, bite mark on this arm, a bite mark on this arm, a bite mark in my back. And this was from 2003. I got married in 2000. So I look at the pictures, and I immediately call my mother. And I'm like, Mom, what is this? And she's like, what do you mean? It's like, these pictures you sent me. What are these pictures you sent me? She said, that's from the time that you came over here that night after something had happened between you and, your wife. And I'm saying, well, what happened? She's like, why are you asking me what happened?
What do you mean?
I have no recollection of that night. Or that. Now, you would think something as significant as bite marks that she said that I went to the hospital for because they had broken the skin and they given me a tetanus shot. I don't remember it. You know what I mean? So it's that kind of thing. Now, and I was saying all that to say that sometimes when I do the talks, something will trigger a memory. And I'll think of something that I hadn't remembered or hadn't thought about in years. And it's just kind of like, oh, gosh.
That's always fun, isn't it?
Yeah. So,
then you're in the middle of doing some talk and you're like,
I need
a minute here.
Yep. It was crazy.
And it is such a process. And we talk about that a lot with recovery from sexual abuse as well. And, you do that, you check out and you do what you have to survive. And what I really appreciate about you is that, number one, you're facing it. Number two, you're trying to help others in the midst of, I feel like you at least did some of your work, but in the midst of still doing this, still dealing with it. And, I just really admire you for that and being willing to share your story. Can you tell us a little more about your ministry? Somebody's listening and they're going, oh my gosh, I think I'm being abused.
Yeah. So one of the things, we want to do is, one, educate. Mm-hmm. I think about my own mother, who at some point I remember her just apologizing to me profusely. Mm-hmm. She's like, oh, I'm so sorry I wasn't there for you, or that I didn't realize this is what you were going through, or this, that, or the other. I'm like, Mom, you didn't know. Mm-hmm. Like, you didn't know what to look for. Right. You didn't know what the signs were, what the red flags were, So I think one of the things is not only educating people that are in the situation, but education in general, because I don't think any of us, if we're not the victim, we're not very far removed from people that are. Yeah. And so if we know the sign, and if we know what to look for or the right questions to ask, then we can help somebody, even if it's not us. Right. Yeah. So that's a big deal. I think the education side of it, and then advocacy, of course, and particularly, when I say advocacy too, not just, so one of the issues is, you've got lobbying groups that try to get bills and different things passed to support victims and things like that. But a lot of times they're women focused. Yeah. And so there aren't as many resources out there for men because of that. And, so trying to advocate for more resources and support for men as well, not even just men, all victims, right? Because, elder abuse is absolutely crazy. Yeah. That's a big thing. Even teen dating violence is gotten really bad.
Yeah. We just had a discussion with the domestic violence group here where I live about teen dating, and they just don't know. They just don't know. Yeah. And then they end up in these situations.
Yeah. They're not aware of what's happening.
And the biggest thing is, it's not like, oh, somebody punched somebody. It's the whole back manipulation and almost brainwashing. And that's what's so dangerous. Yeah. And the fact that you finally said, wow, and I know there's a statistic for women that they leave 7 times before they leave for good. And often they don't make it. And often once they get a restraining order, that's when they get killed. When they seriously leave. Yep. And, the police are like, give a trail, and it's important. But on the other hand, if you are abused and that person's going to kill you, you have to make your decision by what you know, not what people tell you what to do. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very true. It's very true. But so we educate, we advocate. And I think it's very important too, to know that we do it for victims and survivors. So like, for example, we were doing a support group before COVID. We were doing a support group for male victims and survivors, because you know how it is. People want to be able to talk to other people that understand their experience. Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. But unfortunately, one, everybody's not where I am with being willing to talk about it. But I think if you can provide a private and secret venue and let brothers know, hey, you aren't the only one. There are other brothers experiencing what you're experiencing, or have experience with experience, and being able to talk to like-minded people about your specific situation. I think that's a big deal.
It is. And, one of the things about abuse is the first thing they go for is isolation. When somebody gets married and you think they're abusive, and then they move them to another country or another state, and and so then they're alone. Yeah. And so that's really a big deal. And I love it that you're providing a place for people to come. And I don't know what the word you said. It was almost like secretive. It was like a place they can go without, their partner knowing about it.
So we're real careful about how we advertise and put the information out there. And because, even when we advertise, we don't put the location of where we meet. Yeah. Like, you got to contact us first for us to be able to then give you, we don't, you don't share the location. You find a way that if you're, letting your wife know you're going out, you don't want to let her know. I mean, it's tricky, right?
Well,
Because
it's like when women end up in shelters, the first thing they tell them is you can't contact that guy and don't let him know where you are. But you know what? They do. They do. Yeah, and it puts every in danger.
Yeah, and don't forget to turn off your location feature on your phone.
Right? Yeah.
Because nowadays,
because they will use that.
Especially nowadays, it's so much easier to track somebody. When I was going through my situation, suddenly he never cared where I worked. I was a landscaper. Didn't care where I worked, and then suddenly he was showing up everywhere I was. And he was a Microsoft guy. You know, he knew all about technology. So I think he had somehow tracked me. And I was like, how does he figure out where I am? Because he never cared where I was or where I worked until I left. Then suddenly he seemed to know where I was every moment of every day.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So.
Wow.
Well, I'm so grateful you're on the show, and I don't know if we've missed anything, if there's something else you want to share, but I just want to say to anyone listening that's just resonating with this is to reach out to Hampton.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm based in Maryland, in the DC, Maryland, Virginia area, known as the DMV. But if you don't hesitate to reach out, even if you're not in this area, because if I don't have the resource, I'm very good about tracking it down. So don't let the fact that you're not in this area stop you. If I can't help you, I will put you in touch with someone who can. So or if I tell brothers all the time, if you just need to vent, I'll listen.
Yeah.
Well, that's where it usually starts. You just need to find someone to unload on, and the first person that you talk to can be the most important person, whether or not they believe you.
Right.
And
like
support you.
We say it's a process. So you tell someone, then you're terrified, right?
Yeah.
And so it takes a little process to get to the point where you've told someone, now you're going to actually connect with them again because you told them your deep, dark secret. And I think that's kind of the key, is step by step.
Yeah,
for sure.
Find the safe person, find the safe place where you can trust someone.
There's also a hotline, right?
Yes. Yeah. It is 800-799-SAFE. And one of the things I appreciate about them is that they won't just, it's not just for people that feel like they're abused. If you're somebody who knows somebody, they will talk you through how to support somebody, right? It's not just,
that's for not just the person who's being abused, but anyone who thinks they know, or family member.
Yep.
Oh, that's amazing.
I'm so glad about that, because what people don't realize is when their friend is getting abused, they want to go and confront the abuser, and they think they're all, hot stuff. But what happens is they make that victim's life even more miserable and scary. So to, know that they will talk to them is really good, that there's a way to go about this. Yeah. Respectfully. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Hampton. I appreciate it. And your website is, now it seems like it's two. There's Movement Ministries and...
No, my website is makemoves.org.
Makemoves.org. Okay.
Yep.
Makemoves.org. Well, thank you so much. And thanks for being vulnerable. And I just hope people feel encouraged to tell their story.
I appreciate you taking the time to have this very important conversation. Thanks for having me.
So that's it for today.
We are going to have a prayer time if you want to stick with us. If not, we believe in you.
We want to hear from you. We want to hear your stories.
If you like this podcast, please rate and review, because that's how other people can find us. And we really want to spread this message. So we'll take a few minutes and pray.
Father, I just thank you for all the blessings you've given us, and pray that you would be a blessing to those that are needing you right now, and especially for those who are listening that are in a situation that they don't know what to do, how to escape, how to find a safe place. Lord, I just pray that this could be that ray of light in their lives to guide them to a safe place, Lord. And I pray that you would give them the strength and the wisdom and the help that they need to get out of the danger they're in. And Lord, I just pray for your support for Hampton, your blessing on his ministry, Lord. Pray that he would be a blessing to those that need him right now, that need a way out. And also just to know that they aren't at fault, that it isn't their fault that they're in this situation, that they just need to realize that they aren't to blame. It's just what happened. They got into a relationship thinking it was one thing, and then it became something else. And sometimes we think we should have known better, or we think that we should have seen it coming, and we really didn't, and we blame ourselves. But Lord, I just pray that you would help them not to blame themselves, but to find a way to get the help they need, and also, get the safety for themselves and for their family, for their children. And pray that you would just continue to bless his ministry in your name.
Father, I'm just aware of how important telling our story is. And Lord, I just, somebody that's listening, that's been through it, that they might be willing to start sharing their story. And Father, I thank you for Hampton being so vulnerable and willing to share. And Lord, we know he's not through it yet. And I just pray for your grace and your mercy as he continues to walk through this and help other people. And Father, like what Kevin said is, they're so convincing that it doesn't matter how much money you make, what your occupation is, anybody can be in a relationship like this. Lawyers, doctors, it doesn't matter. We're not exempt. And so, Father, anybody that's feeling that place where Hampton was of either or, that Lord, you'll show them there's one more option, and that's to get away.
Lord, I thank you for the opportunity. I thank you for giving me the strength and the courage to continue on and to speak up. And thank you for this platform. And ask that you bless it and bless and, all their endeavors so that they will reach people that need to hear. And hopefully people will be encouraged and being motivated and know that they're not alone, and that there is hope, and that there is help, and that there is a way out, that there is light at the end of the tunnel. So just allow us to continue to be the light for those that are suffering in darkness. Mm-hmm. Even when we may be feeling low ourselves, give us the boost we need to do what you would have us to do and serve your kingdom in our own special and unique ways that you've designed us to do. And so, Lord, we thank you for just allowing us to be a part of each other's lives. And I pray that, we can continue to be a blessing to each other as we all strive to work for your kingdom. In Jesus' name.
Amen.
Amen.